Hi everybody, welcome to your Module 6 overview video. We're going to be moving from our discussion of diversity into our discussion of assessment and assessment of gifted children in the classroom. So here, just a quick review of Module 5. You took a look at Ford and Grantham's advocating for assessment for culturally diverse gifted students. You have that optional blog post that you could have read, and then hopefully you watched. You'll need to watch that Fraser's TABS presentation because that covers the 10 traits, aptitudes, and behaviors that you're going to be looking at with your students or with a student for your TABS assignment that's going to be due this week. And I'll mention that again in just a second. I'll show you an exemplar. I'm going to be grading your Sternberg reflection. I apologize for this being a week late. As you may have noticed, I've been like super on top of grading this whole year except for last week. So I will be both grading your Sternberg reflection that's in your folders and your partner interpretation project that was turned in. So for Module 6, all this is due December 17th at midnight. You are to read in your teaching tools books pages 87 through 102. So look through those as considered a resource guide for optional strategies for assessment of gifted children in your classrooms. And then you're going to review, it's a presentation, and I'm going to be talking about this here in this video to help just give some more language to it, of your product and performance project. That is going to be due in Module 8, closer towards the very end of this course. Your TABS assignment is due. So I tried to situate it so at least you'd have 2 weeks to work on your TABS assignment if you wanted to. That gave you time to pick a student that you wanted to observe and copy down all of your observations there. So your TABS assignment that was initially covered back in Module 5 is going to be due here in Module 6, and that's 20 points. There are 2 exemplars that I posted to the website. I'm going to quickly show you what one of those looks like and just kind of add some additional comments. So here is an example of one that was turned in last year of a high school student, 15. Please don't write the student's real name. Please include a pseudonym. Here, Brittany has added a bunch of different notes about the student. So where they are enrolled, some of the things based on motivation, the clubs that the student is involved in, relationships with peers, etc. So that's just a very brief introduction to the student. It doesn't have to be any more detailed than what you see right here in this exemplar. For motivation and interest and communication skills and all the other tabs, do include comments or examples in each of the categories. If you'll notice here that some of these comments or some of these examples are really specific, and that's really helpful in terms of getting a really good holistic picture of the student that you are assessing with the tabs and using this form on. She down here just highlighted the number that she would have assigned to the student for each of the tabs, so that is one strategy that you can use. If I'm going to encourage you to have a description or a comment or an example under each category. And if for some reason you feel that that child doesn't express one of those tabs at all, then at least document that you are verifying that you have not seen any examples of that trait, aptitude, behavior in your class. Perhaps suggest another classroom where that child might be exhibiting those types of behaviors in. So do make sure that you have some examples in each of these categories. I really like how Brittany included here, and when you read through it, just detailed examples that clearly show her ability to just be really intuitive about the student. That really, to me as a reader, not even knowing the student, I feel very trustworthy in her assessment based on the information, the details that she's included there. And the additional comments, this is where you're just going to make some additional comments as to all of these little categories. We have approach to learning. So here this child is a little bit slow and steady. Personality attributes, kind and thoughtful. And then again, she's including some examples. Being a mature individual, Cheshire Cat does not share a lot of the same interests with his peers. He gets long breath adults and tends to spend his free time hanging out with his teachers. Things like that give some insight that help as you are learning, could be really helpful in terms of how we can therefore assign certain gifted program aspects for the child, different courses or classes or after-school activities or other opportunities. if for some reason, I like how she said to here, you aren't sure, do write something down. Leaving it blank leaves some things up for question. So writing, I have not had the opportunity to see resourcefulness at play is an example of what you can say if you're not sure. That you don't want to be like, we don't want to say that it doesn't exist, but we want to document that we just haven't seen it. But it doesn't mean that child doesn't possess that trait aptitude behavior. And then any additional anecdotal information that you have will also be really helpful. So this is an exemplar, something that would receive a full 20 points out of 20 points for that assignment. All right, so going back to your assignments for this week is you're going to just review your product and performance project. I'm going to kind of introduce it to you, get you kind of thinking and incubating as to which project or product you are going to incorporate into this project, and that is with a presentation. So I'm going to briefly make some comments here. I'm not going to read this presentation word for word because you can do that yourself, and I'm not going to let you just, or not going to bore you with just reading it. But for this product and performance, this is one of those where, as you may have, as I feel like all of us stated in our discussion last week when we met in person, is that you're not always going to capture all of or certain traits of giftedness through some of these standardized testing measures that we use, even if it is the TTCT, the creativity test, or an achievement test, or an IQ test. And so with that, when you review that gifted eligibility chart, you saw that in that second column, sort of our new multiple criteria approach, that students in grades K through 12 can have superior product performance with a score greater than or equal to 90 on a scale of 1 to 100, as evaluated by a panel of 3 or more qualified evaluators. Now, in all of the case files that you looked through during class, I didn't notice, and I don't think any of those case files had a superior product in them as document or as evidence of achievement, creativity, or motivation. However, that is certainly a viable aspect of data that you can include that can count for achievement, creativity, and motivation. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to basically be creating the situation in order to have this opportunity to submit a superior product or performance. So the basics of this evaluation is that a student completes it in a certain class. There's a detailed rubric, which is what we're going to be creating this project, a detailed rubric on a scale of 1 to 100. There are 3 qualified evaluators who are trained to rate and score the product or performance using the rubric. And those 3 qualified evaluators rate it, their score is average, and that score has to be scored at a 90 or above for the areas of achievement, creativity, or motivation in order to be considered for identification. So just those 3 areas, not mental ability, not IQ. It's one of those where theoretically it's kind of hard to be able to capture that in a rubric. So here we're just looking at achievement, creativity, and motivation. The next few slides will give you some ideas of how the product performance is evaluated in terms of those evaluators. And then there is the rubric, which is part of our project here. Your rubric should be detailed and provide descriptions at various levels of performance. It's like basic rubric. Ideally, it would include examples of each category so that an evaluator can clearly assess performance. And again, one area, achievement, creativity, or motivation. Let's see. You're going to mention who you think your trained evaluator should be. So those examples of a qualified evaluator could be a grade or a subject level teacher, could be a scientist from a local business or a local college. Sometimes for the really advanced students, a grade level or subject level teacher that is higher than that student. So say like you're trying to evaluate a 5th grade science project, maybe recruiting an 8th grade science teacher to kind of validate that this is, in fact, perhaps 8th grade level material being expressed by a 5th grader can also be really helpful. They obviously need to know the subject and the content of the product or the performance that's being rated. You would want to basically consider them to be experts, and then you would have to train them in using the rubric. And so maybe you provide a practice round to ensure that they know how to score and that those scores are reliable. So you want all 3 evaluators to essentially, if you think something should receive a score of 95, you want all 3 of those evaluators to be at or around that 95 mark. So in your classroom, most of you probably already have a project or a product or a performance that you could use as part of this identification scenario for some of these kids. So this could be an essay, a science experiment, a social studies poster or project or competition, mathematics challenge, etc. One thing that you want to make sure that in creating this project, that you want to make sure that all children have an opportunity to participate in it. That they all have access to the materials needed to complete it. So, the kid from a highly resourced family and a kid from a lower resource family all have same access to the materials or the resources that they need in order to complete it. You want to make sure that you need it to be in the classroom or to determine that it's the student's work. So you're not sending a project home with a second grader and it coming back looking like the mother or father or guardian attributed to that project. You want to make sure that it's really just done in class. So part of this project, there are 3 parts to the project, and you'll see I have a template for you, so it's all fairly laid out and organized, but you're going to provide me with a narrative, a list of objectives, and your rubric. And that's really it. I don't need to see samples from students or anything like that. Your narrative is going to be like a 1 to 2 paragraph that just sets the scene for this product or for this performance. So you're describing to me what the activity is or what the product, the project is. Where is it in your curriculum? So this is Unit 2, where we're studying all of the different angle relationships, etc. And then what have your students been learning to prepare for this activity? So it somehow gives me a context of where this lands in your curriculum. List some of your objectives. This can be just, copy and pasted from some of the standards that you need, or if you have other objectives with this project, do list those. Maybe you're wanting to incorporate some sort of motivational objectives in terms of keeping the students, how they're working in class or something like that. And then you're going to provide me with a rubric. Now, this rubric doesn't necessarily need to be the exact rubric that you have been using with that product or performance if you're adapting something you've already done. This rubric needs to be specifically related to how it qualifies a student for achievement, creativity, or motivation. So I'll probably repeat that like a bajillion times just because sometimes that's the thing that's a little bit unclear. Some teachers just have submitted rubrics they've done in the past and they don't necessarily show me that if they get a score of 90 or above that they have mastered the achievement, creativity, or motivation that you're looking for. So your rubric, it might be different here for this project than what you typically give to students in class. Reminded, take a deep breath. You're not going to create something new. Don't create a new product or performance or project at all. Take one that you're already using and you're likely just adapting the rubric. You might, in part of this, adapt a little bit of the product or the project based on what you now know about giftedness and characteristics of gifted students, but that's it. I want this project to be useful for you, so maybe either consider one that you've been wanting to tweak for a while or wanting to, just get a little bit more fine-tuned, or if there's one that's coming up in the spring, coming up in the future that you think, wow, that project that we do in March, this would actually be really good for it. So let me kind of revisit that first before we do it in the spring. So it's a 20-point project. It's going to be due in Module 8, which I have as January 14th. Again, you'll put that template in your folder. And then here in that, you can't do it in the video, but I've got several examples of some of these rubrics that you can view listed in that presentation. So here's an example of one of those. Oh, here's your template first. I'll go through your template. So your template, you're going to give me the background information in terms of the class or the course, the grade level, the unit, module of study, elementary, class or course, maybe that's just subject area. Your narrative, here's your 1 to 2 paragraph narrative that describes your activity, kind of situating it in the context. List your objectives, they can just be bullet points, and then your rubric must be used to qualify student for, and I want you to type in here, achievement, creativity, or motivation. I'm going to challenge you that there are, all 3 of these can be useful. Achievement, creativity, and motivation can be useful because you know that achievement standardized tests don't always capture achievement for a certain child. However, because achievement tests are so readily available, for instance, now you do the MAP testing 3 times a year, perhaps something like a product or performance that assesses creativity or motivation may be more useful to you because you may already have that other data really accessible. So you're going to provide a detailed rubric. Make sure that your rubric totals to 100 points because we need to average out those 100 points to see if this child receives a 90 or above. Have detailed descriptions and make sure that your rubric helps provide evidence of a child's performance in either achievement, creativity, or motivation. So I'm going to show you one. I'm going to show you one of those. Here's one that was a rubric for creativity. So let me show you what this looks like. This is not just like one little component out of a whole project that like, oh, the area of creativity, here's what we're scoring. This is a rubric that was just created to assess creativity. So the categories that this person has created, I'll zoom in just a little bit, maybe just once. Imagery, characterization, voice, narrative, and focus on assigned topics. And you can see here, if you look through this, you can see that there's imagery. We're talking about abstractions of imagery, the amount of details, characterizations. You can see how creativity kind of comes out through characterization. Voice, we're talking about original voice, originality as part of creativity, etc. So take a look at that one. There's another one, motivation. So I gave an example of motivation. That third one is achievement. And a rubric like motivation may look like, this was a biology class. They determined categories for motivation to be responsibility, goal setting, self-directedness, and intrinsic motivation. And sometimes maybe your challenge is to how do I put language to some of these. You may find lots of things via Google, or maybe you already have some of this that you're just adapting. But do create a rubric that really details or really provides evidence for the category that you're looking at: achievement, motivation, creativity. The third example that looked at achievement, I think this is an ELA. They looked at achievement for characterization, organization, style, and textual evidence. So these are components of the course, or components of the unit that the teacher was really trying to emphasize. So these were their main concepts of her ELA unit, was characterization, organization, style, and inclusion of textual evidence. So maybe, if you're doing some achievement, maybe your categories relate specifically to your standards, to the standards that are covered in that, in terms of whatever content area you're looking at there. So I know this was a long overview video, but I did want to provide some extra just comments regarding that product and performance overview that's coming up, or that project that's coming up due in Module 8. Remember that Module 10 is our in-residence session. That's Monday, January 28th. So I won't see you guys for a while. Hope you all have a wonderful winter break. Hope you have a wonderful week. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I will see you online soon.